Good morning, everybody. We will begin. We are very surprised how many people registered for this event. We had over 80 registrations. We have, I don't know, now 35 attendees. There's always a dropout rate online. I still hear the popping, so people are coming in. We didn't expect it because obviously it's a little bit technical, geeky, whatever you want to call it, but no harm. Yeah, it's good, it's important, it's an important topic, so we're going to start with it. Everything will be shared afterwards, and obviously we invite you to stay connected through the matchmaking platform for suppliers and as followers for the cities and any other organization interested in the project. The links will be provided with the presentation or later in the chat as well. Okay, the objectives. What is this today about? We first, if you haven't heard of CircularPSP, we want to give you a brief introduction to CircularPSP, and today in particular give you the context needed to understand why we have this taxonomy problem. The core objective, and this will be led by my colleagues at RISE in Sweden, by Sten, Fredrik, and Niklas in the order they appear on my screen, is to achieve a common understanding of what taxonomies are and its principles in the EU. So basically, it is you get an introduction into what it is. Then we will very briefly discuss the way of collecting missing terms and data sources. I phrase it here. Simply, how can you contribute? Yeah, we call it working groups. So obviously, some working has to take place at some point. And we are looking forward and will value your contributions. So we explain how this is done. Since we expect that suppliers or future tenderers are present, we will also clarify what the expectations are in the activities of the working group and before the tender, after the tender, and so on. You need to wait for this at the end of the project, at the end of the presentation, because only then it makes sense. And yeah, this year is an opportunity to matchmake a little bit. Yeah? And for this, you are invited to use the chat as well. So if you want to introduce yourself or say we are a consortium and looking for role X, feel free to use the chat, but keep it short, please. Yeah, do not copy paste the website. Keep it short so that people can actually take note and understand what it's about. So key message in the first few words, and then your message will also lead to success. The agenda is pretty straightforward. First an intro, then the details of the white paper, which will be published after the event. Some more detailed background session on taxonomies, and then on what I mentioned, the co-working part. Okay, since I've spoken, my name is Georg Vogt. I am the head of ICT Innovation and Energy at Empirica. We do European projects. We do connect various fields, typically in IT-related questions. So we are tackling systematic and horizontal problems. Stuff the research alone or policy alone or industry alone typically cannot solve, but where they need to work together to come to a new solution or a new approach, and we are connecting the dots. We are typically not the experts in a particular field. We need always help for that, and in this case, we partnered with RISE, one of the leading experts on circular economy in Europe, and I give the word to Sten.
Good morning. My name is Sten Beck. So I'm from RISE, which is the abbreviation for Research Institutes of Sweden. So we are a research institute having about 3,000 employees in Sweden, and we work in all kinds of fields when it comes to applied research, and our mission very much is within the circular economy and sustainable development. So and for this team we have here is we are all working within the circular economy transition in various kinds, and myself, I've been project manager for various work within innovation procurement, but also circular economy transition. I'll leave the floor to Frederick.
Yeah, it's very brief. I can repeat pretty much what Sten said, with the addition that I have a law background working with procurement, worked in European projects with more PPI and innovation procurement, and work a little bit more towards the sustainable and circular business models perspective, and add that perspective. So over to Nicholas.
Yes, I can just, so I'm in the same field as my colleagues, with a kind of strong emphasis in kind of data and taxonomies and information sharing, kind of open big data and kind of principles for that.
Thank you very much. They will take the words later. So for now, first, a brief introduction what this is here about today and the coming iterations of this meeting, followed by the project, and then followed by the detail of the CE Taxonomy topic as such, led by RISE. So this working group in general, I mean, really brief. Why do we do this? We are a project, I present in a second, and we are confronted with multiple challenges we attempt to solve. And this approach of a working group, of an open working group, is simply the most pragmatic way to solve it. There are multiple advantages for us as included, but there are also advantages for the suppliers. With this, we can limit the effort and reduce the risk, if you want, for suppliers to basically tackle the issue of taxonomies, data sources, and so on. And by working together, we achieve, or we increase the probability that the results are good. Because we could leave this area open to competition and say everybody on their own. And there might be some good, some bad, but the combination of two good is most likely better for everyone, and whilst reducing the effort. So this workshop as a whole is more or less an attempt to standardize. Don't take me in the ISO way of it, but simply in context of the project, standardize certain issues for the project as a whole, so that everybody speaks the same language. What do I mean? So there are a few terms about circular economy which need to be defined. They are currently not defined, but we need to define them for the purpose of the project, because the project, for instance, uses or attempts to use AI to solve it. Hence, without the definitions, the AI will come up with random stuff and not what we want, and nobody will understand it. We need the terms. Then, what data do we use? Again, everybody could search the internet and everybody could have a look at what there is, but it might be more efficient that we simply create a comprehensive collection of it, and with this, everybody is fully equipped to actually work on the solution and not on what goes into the solution. Again, efficiency, I would say, and quality improve. And the final point is that there might be consortia who are highly advanced in built from IT partners, and they're well served in certain ideas of standards, data standards and protocols and so on. But there might be, and we hope there are, suppliers who come from the CE field, and they might need some hint on which direction is it's a wise direction to go to ensure future interoperability. So there's also some work on data standards, but to a lesser degree, because standards are standards. There are things to consider, whilst the other two things are taxonomy and data sources are something we expect suppliers to use in practice during the project and validate the results of this working group. I will explain this at the end in more detail. Here, the mission statement first. We are looking at taxonomy in the context of cities. We are looking at data sources relevant for cities and the principal idea of interoperability. How are we formed? We are a loose working group. It's open, but some members are always there, which will be the CircularPSP Consortium, and obviously the suppliers who win providing the CircularPSP project. The results will be shared, publicly available through online live documents. So whenever you have an idea, then you could enter it there. And don't underestimate the relevance of it, because all of us have always good ideas, but most of them do not become reality because we do not know where to place them. Here, you have the guarantee that there is a place where you can put them, and you know that the CircularPSP Consortium will take care of it. Yeah, we will curate it, maintain it, and at the end of it, attempt to write a paper with all contributions credited for the European Commission. Yeah, and it will be obviously through versions, so this document become a mess. As I said, we curate it. So that's the working group. Now the project. Yeah, some of you know this. Maybe you can pay attention to the notes, which are maybe sound a little bit different than before, because we advanced on the challenge brief. For those who don't know it, the CircularPSP project is a project of multiple cities and regions who have a common challenge, and they all want to transition to circular economy, but it's very, very difficult. Yeah. These cities are already quite advanced in the idea of circular economy. So if they have an issue, then the issue resembles everywhere. Yeah, all other cities have the same problem. And these cities are investing, provided through the help of the European Commission, the European Union, money into R&D projects to develop circular economy solutions, which is spent in a competitive approach. So we will not fund only one, we will fund multiple suppliers, and through a technology funnel, we will at the end test and pilot 2 solutions in practice across all of these cities. We also have a follower network. See the website, it's growing. We only started a month ago to do it properly. And yeah, many are interested in the way we are handling this problem, because we approach it horizontally, and only few have done it so far. And the cities recognize that this is something they need as well. Okay, in terms of the circular economy as a problem, yeah, and giving kind of the scope and the dimension of the issues we are looking at. 2 dimensions. First, complexity, how complicated is it? And secondly, today. The important thing is today, not 10 years ago or 20 years ago, today. How complicated is it today? And the second thing is how many people need to be actively involved or are directly affected, knowingly affected by it, that they need to change behavior, for instance. So when it comes to electricity, it's basically solved. Yeah, it's been solved for a while. It just needs to be done. It's my view on it. You know, the electricity grid just needs an upgrade. Put more PV, whatever, more smartness. You're solved. Mobility. Well, you first need to replace all the cars and the fuel infrastructure. But again, on paper, it's solved. It just needs doing, and obviously, it's in progress. Even if some countries, as recently announced, want to be slower than the ambition they originally stated. Heat, very complicated, because not because as such, but because the buildings, the legacy under it is so diverse, and obviously many people, all the building owners need to be involved in the process and convinced or swayed to make the move. But the ultimate issue is circular economy. Yeah. Here we have achieved very little so far. How long we talk about it, we are at 8-9% circularity at this moment. And not only do a lot of solutions still not exist, many people need to be involved to make it actually happen. Yeah, to switch from linear to circular is a big societal challenge, and we are tackling it. So what are the problems for the transition to a circular economy from the perspective of cities? Yeah, I mean, if cities want to do it within their own domain, in the wider domain they can influence. Which areas of problems do they have? So the first is simply understanding circularity in the sense of all the things which need or could be done. Yeah, theoretically easy, but every problem is different. So what could I do? Yeah, and I will later display a sheet in the Excel file we are going to share on how many databases there are, or which we know, on case studies. Nobody can be expected to read them. It's a mess. Yeah. So we need a solution which kind of sorts this and makes this information good information, valuable information, accessible and usable for regular municipal workers. And then they need to be empowered to actually use it in practice during the day. Yeah. Knowing of something is not doing it. So how can on city level and in local businesses someone actually do something about it? Modern solutions would basically help pass the way and prepare certain steps which can be taken and breaking it down to make it into small pockets of challenges which people can tick off one by one and will eventually arrive at the intended result. And finally, even all of this is great, but as a city, I don't have the capacity to actually roll it out. Yeah, my staff is already at its limits. I don't have highly educated or highly professional circular economy experts. How do I get there? And here we need a platform to approach this issue and give structure, A, and B, simplicity to the two things mentioned before. Yeah, that information is available and that people can act on it. And this is organized in a way that I can actually use it without having to think much about it. Yeah? That I, for instance, know who to call if I have a question. So, yeah, I've already mentioned it. The idea is a platform supported by AI and NLP, which is able to support all levels of the city, city high level, making the strategy, those who make the small decisions. And since all of this is also relevant for local businesses, provide access to these relevant tools also to the local economy. Because ultimately, whatever the city wants to do, if it doesn't have the suppliers on nearby able to serve this, not much will happen or not little impact will be achieved. Okay, the user groups, just to explain how we are thinking very briefly. So obviously they are experts. Yeah? We call them intermediaries at city level who are either responsible in a department for circularity or across departments across the city on circularity. These are those are pretty much represented in our project. You will have direct access to them. And they know about circularity, but they don't have access to all the information, and they are limited in capacity to reach out to their respective cities. And then we have varying expertise levels for the municipal workers and the local businesses. So these are our main user groups. Yeah, this is just as background to when we are talking about taxonomies, data sources, and so on. For whom is it? These are the recipients of it. And here, most of it has been already said. The innovations we will require from the suppliers. The tender is expected to be released in, I don't know, at the earliest in the second week of November. And it is about AI or some pattern-like solution, which is smart enough to use taxonomies and language and data, missions and workflows, the strategy and what people do. Excuse me. And the platform itself. And obviously, all of this is great. You provide a tool, but people need to be able to use it. So we also expect a solution regarding the change and how these staff are upskilled to understand circular economy and the platform. In short, we define the problem. Yeah, we kind of describe this is missing, and the suppliers will come to us and describe the solution. Yeah, and the first describe in the proposal, and then through the project we are going to develop it, and I mean obviously the suppliers most of all, but we, the procurers, will provide input continuously. We will not walk away. We will do this together, and ultimately test it with real people. On this today, yeah, this is on this today, this entire taxonomy issue. Yeah, I'd like to point out that it is important. You need it to succeed in this project, on the 10 or in this project. You need to have someone on the team who can do it. But like in a hospital, not everybody needs to be a surgeon. Yeah, so do not think that you need to understand the depth of everything which is to come. But you should know enough to understand that what the operation is about. Yeah, if you're going to hospital, if you're going to the doctor and he tells me I'm going to cut up your stomach, then you should know what it is about and what it's for and what it should do. Yeah, so this is today will achieve that. You will have insight into what it is about, and then you can delegate the task, or it is already you who's going to do it anyway. Then you need to inform your colleagues. And this event is, yeah, the discussion before it is going to come. Yeah, the tender, the challenge brief is going to come in November. Use the opportunity to ask questions a little bit, what taxonomies are and so on. Don't be shy. As we said, discussions are not recorded or questions are not recorded. This is an educational event. And again, this is not the challenge brief. Yeah, I mean, the challenge brief is to come. This here is a task activity we, in a way, pulled out of the challenge brief to make the challenge brief slimmer and to avoid duplication of effort, do it jointly, yeah, together, rather than alone. I think this is for the benefit of all parties, and it improves the result at the end. And with this, I hand over to my colleagues at RISE, who will, who are the surgeons.
Thank you very much, Georg, for that very good introduction to our part here. So I will now go through some basic background around the issues for the municipalities and how we look upon taxonomies and in what kind of environment we can see this and what kind of issues there are for municipalities. I'll start with some pictures and slides, and then I will hand over to my colleague Frederick for some clarifications. And Niklas is always with us. Niklas is the I would say the main expert in our team when it comes to taxonomies and their how they are worked with and what the background in, and he has also been working very technically with AI tools and so on. So we have put these slides together as a team, and I will just be the one showing them now in the beginning here. So what issues we have for the municipalities? Well, first of all, when it comes to circular economy and so on, it's very important to understand what is a circular city, because of course there are heaps of cities around there in the world claiming or would like to claim perhaps that they are working circular or not. These circulars are not real cases. I just put them out on the map to show that it could be like this in, let's say, 15, 20 years, that there are quite amount of circular cities claiming themselves being circular. But of course, we need some sort of common language for this. And when it comes to this, there are some standardization. Let's say the common European standardization and interoperability framework, which is then saying something about the established taxonomies and standards used within the European Union. Is also the European data strategy, which there is a link for at the moment. But so, and then of course there are also terminology and and principles stated in the new ISO standard for circular economy, which is also a way of standardizing what kind of language is used for when we are talking about circular economy. But when we discuss this in this session, we'll go very much into the Common European Standardization and Interoperability Framework, which is our base for this, as a way of finding a common language for measurements and a common language for what we call circular economy. So this is a background. We need some sort of common language and measurement. Another thing that is also part of a background for the AI and the machine learning is the open data and linked data. You can see those two pictures. There are immense amount of open data out there at the moment, at this very moment. And the first picture to the left there is a graphical illustration of what kind of data was out there in the beginning from 2007 up to 2010 and so on. And just in a couple of years until 2014, the amount of data has increased dramatically. So this picture to the right shows some sort of illustration of how many data points there are open available for anyone that want to harvest data. So there are very much data, and of course it's very much around open data around Wikipedia and so on, but there are also other sorts of data. So data, so what we can say here is that the data used is open for anyone that wants to harvest data. And one of the most important one is the open government data, which is something that every government puts out there. And the whole idea of open data is to make it available for everybody and to build knowledge, really. EU has the EU Open Data Portal, which gives us access to open data from the EU institutions, all the agencies and other bodies, and the European Data Portal that provides data sets from local, regional, and national public bodies across Europe. So this is data that is openly available for anybody that knows how to harvest it, really. So in terms of content, if you look at all the open data that is out there, there are data sets in most areas. You can find it when it comes to authority data. You can find it in biomedicine, media, geographical information, and so on. So there are heaps of data of all kinds and various themes. Just to mention, as you see in this early picture from the Open Data Network, you see the word DBpedia, which is more or less all the data that is shared through Wikipedia, which is about 3.5 million concepts. And also another big provider of data is GeoNames, provides RDF descriptions, more than 7.5 million geographical information data sets. So there are heaps of data that is available out there. So the data about emissions and circularity is something that we can find through the EU Taxonomy, which is then also an open data source. And the whole idea of this is very much to find out how you can harvest data. So it is possible then to harvest the data and combine data from different data sets to fit what you really want to achieve, what kind of purpose you have, and you do that through APIs. So this is what is available out there. Niklas, would you like to add something there?
Well, I think it's fairly clear, but I mean, like, if you want an example, so for example, you could combine DBpedia, so say information on a city, and then you connect that to geo data, which allows you to find where the city is, and then you can combine that with other types of data. So say, for example, you're interested in kind of, say theoretically, you would be interested in specific weather conditions in adjoining cities. So you would have information in each city, and then you can kind of see patterns of how temperatures changes comparably between cities, for example. I mean, so the question is really like using big data and open data. The question is at the core is your understanding of a problem, and then you can find data sets that will allow you to kind of answer the question in a smarter way that's automated by reusing other actors kind of data.
Thank you. So just connect this to artificial intelligence and also our own intelligence that we have in our brain. This is one way of graphically showing how data is worked with within the brain, but also in machine learning for artificial intelligence. So data, we say in this pyramid is the smallest sort of piece of data, which could be 10.2 million people somewhere, or 8 tons of CO2 per capita. Data that are out there in the open, accessible. And then these data could be combined into information. So let's say that we combine the data for Sweden and CO2 emissions. We can say that the CO2 emissions in Sweden is 8 tons CO2 per capita 2022. That's a piece of information when we put together data into some sort of statement. Of course, this is a very simple way of putting things, but this is actually a way that can explain how data is handled. And then when we have all this kind of information, we can create knowledge out of this. We can, thanks to a lot of information, the brain and also the machine learning and the AI can create knowledge about how CO2 emissions correlates to other issues within the energy sector or whatever. So let's say that the causes of CO2 emissions are, for instance, from the energy sector, burning fossil fuels, and the transport and so forth. So we create knowledge out of all this information that is out there. And then when we have been creating a lot of knowledge for several years or several hours perhaps for a machine learning or a big brain, we could then also, after a while, call it a wisdom, where the knowledge goes into some sort of wisdom that the society can build on. But we build our development on knowledge and wisdom and base it on information and, of course, ultimately the data that is out there in the world, empirical. So you can then as Nicholas mentioned before, you can combine new knowledge from new combinations of data. So let's say we, as he said before, also the average temperatures you can find from some sources. You can find population growth, you can find emissions, you could find geographical information system coordinates, and so on. All these data can be combined to fit your purpose. So data should be findable, accessible, interoperable, reusable, and also machine actionable. Because if data is in this way, then you can create a machine learning operations from it. And you can also analyze data. And to be able to effectively analyze data, it is very important that the data is standardized and documented in the form of taxonomies. So that's the sort of the background why we are talking about taxonomies in this workshop here. Because this is sort of the background for creating knowledge and wisdom within circular economy. So then going over to this area, I would like to introduce Frederick, who will then give us an example.
Yeah, I'm going to do AI and circularity for dummies because I was the dummy, so I think I'm qualified. I've been working with circularity for many years, and I always thought that AI would be a perfect tool to help us understand all these things that we don't, that are, like Georg explained, too complex. And now getting into it, it becomes clear and more clear what can be done with the AI and what cannot. What do we need to do in our own brains, like you said, Sten. So first of all, we have all these fantastic pools of data, and a lot of it is crap, is useless, unless we know why it is collected and structured. So if we use the, can I do the, no? Do you have to do the animations part?
Say control up to the left there.
Yeah. Otherwise, this image won't be that interesting.
Okay, you have control now?
Yeah, perfect. So this is the pyramid Sten showed us a moment ago. So that if there is an area of interest called materials management, which we make up, then there is also a lot of data collected and structured in order to inform people working with materials management. And on those issues that are important for that sector or that those stakeholders. And from that information, they build knowledge based on the data, and they create the wisdom of that area. And that data makes sense because we can understand how it's collected and structured and why. And the same goes if we have another area, we call it waste management, and it's the same principle. They have different issues they need information on, and they need to relate to their building of wisdom. And the problem for us now, creating a new focus area or a new area of interest from the perspective of circularity, is what in these already gathered data is relevant for our wisdom building or focus area. Because we don't want to create all this data collection from scratch. We don't want to build all these new sources and structures in order to collect circularity data and build information. We want to use as much as possible what's already out there. And then we need to understand how it interacts with the data and the information and knowledge we are currently building within circularity. So in order to do that, that's what we talk about with these taxonomies and these structures, that the more we understand of how the current data is structured and for what purposes, it's much easier to understand what can we use directly and what can we create algorithms and AI learning in order to use. And I think that when we talk about in the level of information, when something that is already collected to help us be informed, then we can translate that into our own circularity issues. We can, by different vocabularies or languages, translate directly that information into our area of interest. So on that level, we need to understand how can the other areas of information be linked to our questions. And I'll say that that's probably the simplest thing, and that's what we do today. We look in for example, companies reporting, and we translate their reporting. We aggregate it and we use it, and we don't need to understand the underlying data. We don't need to go to that. So the next level of difficulty is to understand or connect our issue or our need for information with the data collection within another area. And this is a lot of what Sten been presenting with the structure of that data, the needs for it to be interoperable, and the taxonomies used when it's gathered. So this is what we really need the AI functionality to help us with, because we can't directly access this data for our own growing understanding. So those are sort of the basics that we want to get out of the functionality of the tool that we hopefully procure in the coming years. But also we see if it stopped.
Sorry.
Yeah, I lost control. That happens a lot. So let's see if I can get it to, yeah. We also would like the functionality to move knowledge directly from other areas into the circular domain. And that's when we talk about stories, narratives, cases, case studies. That is to get knowledge from other areas directly translated into our issues and our queries. And the higher level of exchange between different domains is what we typically do when we talk to people. We ask questions, we interact, and we have a dialogue. And in my dream vision of the AI, I can chat with it, and it only uses reliable information to provide wisdom. But I come to realize that this is probably a lot to ask from the systems, especially within the scope of our budget and project. But still, we need to show that part of interaction to be able to query and dialogue with an AI or some kind of chat function is the need for a lot of people working in these organizations. They don't exactly know what information they need. They don't have all the knowledge already programmed into their brains, so they need a dialogue on the wisdom, or at least a dialogue on how to build the knowledge. But I made those connections, the dotted lines, because we think that those are sort of the added extra to the functionality we hope for. So from the user perspective, it's this circularity perspective that needs to use all the other data out there as efficiently as possible, because also we don't really know how big this circularity pyramid is. We are trying in this project to work with the absolute needs of knowledge and information on circularity, the core needs, to focus on that. That is what the users have to do. They have missions, they have regulations, they need to have this information and knowledge in order to respond. But there's also a lot of issues that we are learning and trying to build new knowledge on. So this pyramid, since it's also quite new, is constantly developing. So one of our most difficult tasks is to find the pyramid within the pyramid in order to in the challenge brief, as Georg mentioned, to describe the core needs of the municipalities on circularity and data. And that's what we hope that we can do in this project. And then also point towards these dotted lines as future steps of development. I think that's all for the dummy perspective, and let's get into the more hardcore.
Thank you, Fredrik. I think this is a very good illustration of where we are heading with the project based on the maps and the big dotted graphics of open data. I never said that. I mean, there was a picture of the 2014 cloud of data, but it's not possible anymore to do any kind of illustrations because the amount of data is so immense at the moment, so that it doesn't make sense to put it into a picture anymore. So the last picture is from 2014, or possibly a little bit later. Somebody has tried, but of course, now there are so much data. So to build this pyramid, I would like then to also go into some taxonomy, some categories, terms, and definitions. So this is also a background introduction into what it means with a taxonomy and how that is working today. So as an example, I would like to start off with the taxonomy for the standard European nomenclature of production economic activities, NACE, NACE, which is then is the standard for how you classify companies or entities, which is part of the statistical, how the statistical the governmental national statistics are done and so on. So this is a taxonomy that follows a standard. It breaks down the universe of economic activities. The codes can be associated with a statistical unit carrying out the activity as it designates, and it also has correlation with the international standard industrial classification of all economic activities in the world. So there is a connection between the international standard, the standard European nomenclature, and for instance in Sweden we have something called SNI, which is then the Swedish nomenclature for industry. So this is a taxonomy that exists and has been existing for many years in both national government, national authorities, and European authorities. And you can see there that they, for instance, it's classified then into section A, and then the section A1 is agriculture, and then under the agriculture there is coming all these kind of agriculture kind of industries, and then it comes to a new section B, which is then into fishing, and then you put it like this. So this is a catalog of industries. And whenever you start an industry or any kind of organization, you need to classify your organization, your entity within this taxonomy. Another example is then, of course, the EU taxonomy. And that is the interoperability of financial and green data, which is very much, it's created as a way of harvesting data within the sustainable development. Even it's called the EU taxonomy, it's very much focused on sustainable development transition. So this is a regulation describing a framework to classify green or sustainable economic activities executed in the European Union, and it also enables data from entities within the EU. And the objectives of all this data is to to go into to harvest data around climate change mitigation, climate change adaptation, sustainable use and protection of water and marine service resources. Transition to a circular economy is there as well as number 4, and it's also about having data around pollution prevention and control and protection and restoration of biodiversity and ecosystems. But this is also then a taxonomy created with the highest range of classes that you see here. It could be in forestry, manufacturing. In the example, you can read this kind of example, but it also connects to the NASA, as you see the column to the left there in the example. It correlates to the NASA index that we found in the previous example, as we found here. So there is an interoperability between NASA and the EU taxonomy. But basically, the EU taxonomy is just a grid on an extra layer for the businesses in Europe. Now you have, if you are this kind of industrial entity, you have to you have to publish your data according to the EU taxonomy, if you as part of the regulations for green and sustainable economic activities. So that is also then a taxonomy, but there is no special taxonomy for transition to circular economy. I mean, it's one of 6 areas objectives for the taxonomy in total. So this is of course of interest for us to be part of the further development of the EU taxonomy with this project. So as you have seen so far, there are these catalogs, this way of putting up a catalog, and the framework for this that facilitates the interoperability between taxonomies is actually that there is what is called a DCAT system. And DCAT is a vocabulary for publishing data catalogs on the web using what is called the RDF computer language. And as you see here, is a computer language possible and able to retrieve and manipulate data stored in what they call the resource description framework format. This is becoming now very, very technical, but just as you know, as a way of giving you a little bit of a nerdic insight into what is actually behind all this, what does it come down to? So DCAT provides data sets and data services to be described and included in a catalog, and it facilitates the consumption of aggregation of metadata from multiple catalogs. So there you can then enable us to allow federated search for data sets across catalogs in multiple sites. As you saw, there can be many different kinds of taxonomies, and you can increase the discoverability of data sets and data services. So it's important for the AI that we want to see the solution that they are based on the DCAT system. So data from different countries can be combined through, for instance, DCAT APSE, which is the Swedish version of the DCAT catalog. And then there is another one for Germany, DCAT APGE, and DCAT AP is the European then. So there are overlaps here also into the NASA and the CPV, which is the catalog and the taxonomy for procurement. Would you like to say something more around this, Niklas, as being the main expert?
No, I think it's good. Yeah.
Good. So we can also now look into another example of a taxonomy, which is the EU public procurement taxonomy, the CPV codes. And these are consisted of, this is also then a main vocabulary for defining the subject of a contract, and a supplementary vocabulary for adding further qualitative information. Just as a way of making it more dynamic, Niklas, you could tell a little bit more around CPVs, because this taxonomy gives some, but you can see it as an example to the right. It's following the same kind of structure.
Well, so CPV is to codify a procurement. So basically, what do we need to buy? And then there's kind of a way to categorize what you want to buy, but there's also an underlying logic on how to organize a lowest price versus value for money procurement. But within CPV there are overlaps to NACA codes, so that provides a taxonomy connection. And there's other overlaps to the EU Green Taxonomy. So just by these connections, there are a direct way of kind of connecting information on procurements with information from statistics, which would be NACE, and with aspects of the EU Green Taxonomy. And then, yeah, so it's a good example where you have certain overlaps, but where there are not overlaps, then you would have to have principles for how to kind of be able to combine the data that doesn't have direct overlaps. But yeah, and a comment on that is that for CPV, the amount of data is immense in terms of historic products being procured. So there's a lot that can be done with that data if you want to understand procurement, because it's very open, very available. It's very malleable from a data perspective.
So the purpose of showing all these examples is very much as a way of giving you sort of the examples of taxonomies that are used. And with this project, we really want that the machine learning is based on these, because one of the biggest workflows for circularity is people working with procurement. And of course, there is a need for a connection to all these taxonomies that are already existing, so that the machine learning becomes effective.
There's a question here. So what does it's a common procurement vocabulary. So that's kind of the language for procurements in the EU. And there is also, for example, UNSPCS, which would be, it kind of originated in the UN for procurements, but it's now kind of used in, for example, Canada and the US and a lot of other countries. So these are kind of distinct languages of how to create the storyline for what you want to buy. That are not connected. Then there are reasons for that, but that's another discussion.
Thank you for that clarification. So in summary, taxonomy is a set of classes or concepts that are organized in a hierarchy. So some sort of hierarchy. It's often usually depicted as a table of content or an organogram. It could also be done. So it means that the further down for more specific words, the number of shared features decreases, and so on and so on. And the most classical, one way of a very well-known taxonomy is the taxonomy of animals and mammals and animals and vegetables, which Carl von Linné was creating 200 years ago. Which so the Linnaeus taxonomy. So that is sort of one sort of ideal, one of the most known and reputable taxonomies. So upper classes possess all the features of the lower classes. So if you are an animal, you could then is divided everything under animal. You'll then come to the mammals, and you will come to the other kinds of animals, and then you have the plants, then you'll go down the tree for that. So that this is sort of the standard of taxonomies. Data that can be turned into information are made available with the relationships to other data in the taxonomy. And organizing data is such a in such a hierarchy makes it easier to use, reuse, and analyze. So that's what we have been discussing very much now. So what we have tried to show you is that taxonomies is really the cornerstone for how the data can be organized and processed, thanks to this hierarchy. And by following common principles with an ever increasing amount of data sources, it can then create tangible value for the one that wants to harvest and combine new data. And how data can be combined is very then important for building knowledge and intelligence. And I think that is also very much what the last picture here is about, is that when we have all this open data, we can now build the pyramid that Fredrik showed us before of data information, and build the knowledge and wisdom so that people out there in cities can actually, together with the machine learning, always create more knowledge and wisdom with the help and assistance of artificial intelligence that uses all these taxonomies that are already there, and then also assist our own brain to create the best wisdom around circularity. So then we would also like to show you an example, and I think, Nicholas, if you could give us more light insights to this example of how data can be linked to each other.
Yeah, so yeah, this example is for something I have done, kind of linking data. So the principles, so there is different types of data. So there's statistical data, and for example, that could be have a based on taxonomy like NACE. So the thing is that because of the interoperability between NACE and ISIC, which would be the global level, you could pool information, for example, information from Data Europe, which is about you're interested in patents and you want to connect that to health data. So then you can, by this kind of overlap, you can then combine that information, and beyond the information on patents, you could connect that to organizations. The same would be, so say you're interested in health, you're interested in patents in health, and you're interested in, say, the connection between patents in health and Horizon 2020 applications of companies with certain patents. There's something you're interested in finding out about, and then you can combine that data through these connected taxonomies, and ideally they would also be connected through DCAT, which would make life easier. And then depending on the problem you want to solve, then you can apply, for example, you would then take you would use an API to get that information and combine it into kind of a coherent database, and then you could analyze it with, for example, natural language learning as a method, and say find patterns in the so what's specific for a type of med tech company in that has applied for patents in and have won Horizon 2020 applications. And then by connecting that to another taxonomy, so say, for example, you could use, there are different taxonomies for organizations or project management. So IPMA would be one type of taxonomy, so the International Project Management Association. There are a number of these ways of organizing projects and organizations. So then you could provide that information to the right part of an organization for their analysis, or you could analyze it for them depending on the technology you would use. So that would be one way of linking data from diverse sources. You could combine this as well with North American for NICE, etc. So the core question is to understand what is the problem, the circularity problem in this case, for the end user, and which type of data would I need to combine. So, and if it's statistical, then it's easier. And what type of data sources, say, for example, patents applications, would I need to get an understanding of patterns that will allow that organization to make better decisions? So, but there's kind of millions and there's billions of different combinations, but to make them as useful as possible for as many as possible, and to make them possible to connect to an actual workflow in an organization, you should speak the common language. So that's kind of because, and I think that's kind of a core problem in terms of competitiveness in the EU, is that we don't use a common language, so that we can't create innovations based on what you actually have commonly collected, in a sense. I think there's a question.
Great. Thank you. There is we are coming into the Q&A session here, but this was just a final example on how we then can create knowledge and wisdom, and also the pyramids for circularity that Fredrik was showing before.
Okay, just briefly, kind of how are we going to work, yeah, in this working group? Okay, so what do we, as a wrap up, what do we want to achieve? Yeah, so for the use of the system as a whole, as the solution as a whole, yeah, we need to identify terms and data sources. Yeah, and that's basically it. Yeah? What is relevant for municipalities, which is not yet defined? That's a key point. I mean, there might be already good definitions of things. So if someone is taken care of, then we would take them on. Yeah, as long as they suit us, we would take them on and refer to it, and basically say, to look up this term, please use definition Y or X or whatever. As I said, as I explained before, in the context of being able to later compare the solutions. The same applies to data sources. What is core for for us for the solution? It should be identified and collected once rather than many times, because it's a lot of work. Very important. If you have private data, yeah, you have basically IP on that. You don't need to share that. Okay. If it is your solution, something, a product, then we're not expecting for you to share it all with the taxonomy. Okay. That's very important. I think this point wasn't made by me before sufficiently. Over time, we're going to iterate it and begin to test this taxonomy, basically through the solutions. Yeah, the prototypes you're going to develop, and at some point we will see whether benchmarks, indicators, if they haven't appeared, could be also added to it. Because the machine is a machine, it can solve many problems if we believe it's simple enough, but to be seen. I don't know. Definitely, we continue testing, and ultimately we will go out to the sites, and actual, not only intermediaries from the partners will use your solution, but actual workers of whose name we don't know yet. Yeah, we will recruit people on the job to use your solution and to test it. And as a result, as a wrap up of this, we will update our white paper and basically say, hey, here, this is stuff which is needed for municipalities. It should be defined on European level, so that good innovations can come about which help us. Yeah, and our innovations, which we achieved in our project, are rewarded for the fact that they have been first movers. Both things should apply. If in the course of the process, yeah, of this limited scope, I just phrased, limited scope, there appear a group of very interested experts to solve a certain problem, which is maybe a bit outside of the scope of CircularPSP, we will support that. Yeah? We will provide you with infrastructure and organize meetings and so on. Just state your preference if this may be. So how can you contribute? Yeah, basically, it will be during the meetings, through the exchange, which was very exciting already. And it will be through basically you editing content a little bit. To suppliers, again, to potential tenders in the future, you do not have to disclose anything you already have, or even ideas which you think should be there. It is up to you. Yeah. However, if you provide input to the proposal, that's probably good for you. And secondly, if you provide input, it will be upon the discretion of us, the CircularPSP Consortium, potentially made available to everyone. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I give a simple example. You know, a database of 5,000 circular economy cases. If we had Googled right, we would have found it. You add it to the table, and it will become public knowledge with the next iteration of our files. What you do, if you bid for this tender, then what you do is definitely commit that you will use the most recent terminology and data sources. Yeah. We need this to be able to look at solution A and solution B, assuming that you use the same terms and you have access at least the same data sources. You can have access many things more, as long as they're useful. You can access whatever you want, whatever on-site stuff you already have. It's up to you. It's your black box. But certain things needs to be common so that we know what is actually good and what is actually bad, and not a fluke. So, by conclusion, if you have a very sophisticated taxonomy system in the background, you can use it as long as it does not contradict ours. Yeah? How will we work? We will basically set up, share 2 files afterwards with you. I will not show them now. They're boring. They're quite empty right now, simply because it is a start. A Word file where you can comment and add content with track changes on terminology and standards, and an Excel file for data sources, yeah, where you can enter a row and say, this is a good source for whatever. The structure of the files is preliminary. If you say it's poor, then you let us know and we will work on it. All of this can be simply done through Exchange as usual, and the next meeting. Timing. Okay, we have our project. It has certain phases. We are bound by it. Yeah, and since we require suppliers to work off the project, to work also in a taxonomy, obviously this determines to a good degree how we will proceed with this working group. So it will not be many meetings. Yeah, it will be just a few. It will be there will be no meeting. We expect no meeting until the submission of the tenders, and then we will have a kickoff meeting, and then maybe something in between. So it goes for the coming phase. Yeah, you see the durations at the top: 5 months, 8 months, 11 months. Basically, this is how long the project will be after release of after beginning of after the contracts have been awarded. Sorry. This is floppy language. I recognize CE Taxonomy updates. What we mean is the output files we create. Yeah, so we will create. You will receive after this event our white paper, basically stating what Fredrik, Sten, and Niklas have described, and then these reference files, basically saying this is what we know now. If you add to it as a supplier, then you add to it. Yeah, we will not assume that something has changed in the files in between, unless it's been already public. We will simply create versions of it over time, make them available for everybody, whether you're a supplier or not, to use or for your research, whatever you want to do. And the ambition at the end of the project is to also write a policy paper to the relevant organizations, definitely the European Commission, but maybe there are others, to say, this has been useful for us. We need to proceed. We need this standardized. Okay. Otherwise, the reminder for anyone who's interested in the tender, register on the matchmaking. There you can then wait for someone to contact you, but you can also use the matchmaking to search for someone you need and try build a consortium. Yeah. There will be training events, definitely, and afterwards you can still talk. Training events on the tender, rather in November than October. Yeah, and for if you were a City follower, please follow our project. It helps us also to project to the suppliers that this is a lot of has a lot of interest. The data, this is growing. Yeah, I mean, you see, whatever the status is right now, I'm very hopeful that this will increase. Okay, yeah. I don't share the files because we're over time. I didn't expect this. It's a success, I would say. But you will get access to the files via links after the event. Then, last words.
Yeah, are there any questions on this last part? I think it was very clear. No hands up. So then we are about to close then, aren't we?
I think so.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.